I'm Jenni Carlson.
I'm Barry Trammell. Welcome to the Jenni and Berry Show.
With the end of spring football at OU, eyes have started to turn even more towards the Sooners' future in the SEC. Next time they're on Owen Field, they will be members of the SEC.
So it's time for us to start thinking about life in the SEC also. What will it be like? What are we looking forward to? We'll talk about that and much more.
But first, we want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Berry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, Two Fellas Movers, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to our show, please do so on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps us a bunch, and that helps you. So subscribe today. All right, Barry, as I said, spring football, it's in the books at OU. That means the next time out, members of the SEC, we're going to just talk about football life in the SEC today. There'll be time to talk about all the other OU sports in the SEC. But thinking about OU playing football in the SEC, what are you looking forward to most?
Well, I think this particular season, the Sooners were given a very difficult but also a very fascinating schedule. The Sooners are going to 3 stadiums in the SEC that they've never been to before. Never in the history of Oklahoma football have they played at Auburn. Have they played at Ole Miss? Have they played at LSU? I assume maybe the first year or two of the Big 12, OU had a year in which they went to 3 stadiums for the first time, but maybe not. Probably. In fact, now that I think out of it, definitely not. So this may be going back to the dusty days of statehood. Last time Oklahoma went into this many new places. And you're talking about really storied places when you talk about Tiger Stadium and the Grove in Oxford, Mississippi, and, of course, Jordan-Hare in Auburn. So just these new environments, we've heard a lot about them. Some of them, I'm sure, are fabulous. Some are probably overblown. A lot of SEC hype, in case anybody hadn't noticed. But it's going to be fascinating just to see the Sooners in these new environments.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I think Oklahoma, Joe Castiglione's done a good job in non-conference scheduling, taking OU football to some of these places like Tennessee. Tennessee obviously comes to Norman this year, but Sooners will go there next year. But they've played in Knoxville. They've done that. They've played in some of these, stadiums. Brian Denny at Alabama, they've played there, had a home and home with Alabama not too long ago. So they have had some experience in that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think that, seeing some of these places that, when it comes to an Alabama, when it comes to a Tennessee, I think, people are pretty darn aware of the passion of their fans. But, when you think about Auburn, when you think about Ole Miss, LSU, maybe not, but those first two, I don't know that people would necessarily put them, as high on the passion scale as, say, Alabama or LSU. But from what I've seen from afar, those are places that on game day, the environment is crazy. The passion runs, at 100 plus all the time with their fans that are there. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like, what that experience is for Oklahoma fans. Because Barry, the thing that I've heard most from fans is how much they want to go to these different places. They don't want to go to Lubbock anymore. They don't want to go to Ames anymore. They want to go to Oxford. They want to go to Baton Rouge. So the fans that get a chance to go, what's their experience like? I think that's going to be really fascinating to hear from people. Just what do they feel? What do they think after being at some of these places? Is it everything they hoped? I mean, I don't know if it could be, but I think that's going to be an interesting narrative to listen to as these fans get a chance to experience some of these places.
Yeah, it's the newness factor, right? I mean,
right.
A new restaurant comes down. Hey, you want to go there? Don't go to the Italian joint that's been great to you for once a month for 5 years. Go to the new guy that you don't know if he can make a meatball or not. But but we have heard great things about these places, and the one thing I push back on is when I hear people saying, it's way better. Let me tell you, the game day atmosphere in Manhattan, Kansas is second to none. I mean, They put on a show and they're into it. The crowd at Ames is fabulous.
Yeah.
But the Sooners have been going up there literally since Woodrow Wilson was president. So, this newness thing, Death Valley at Tiger State, Saturday night in Baton Rouge. I've heard about that literally my whole life since the 1970s. In the 70s, OU and OSU mostly played day games, clearly at home, and at night wouldn't be a game on. I'd just go in the living room, and we had a big radio, and I'd flip the top dial, and you could get a big New Orleans station. I think it's WWL 870 maybe. But anyway, you could pick up LSU football games, and you could feel the atmosphere coming through the radio waves. Yeah. So
hear Tiger Rag in the background and all that stuff.
Yeah, and Auburn, with great tradition. So I think it's just the newness. Hey, we're going to experience something we haven't experienced before. Similar, the Army game that got canceled by COVID. Look, everybody, not everybody, but everybody with the chance to go was going, and looked so forward to that because it was just going to be such a unique experience. Sooners are headed for a lot of unique experiences in the SEC.
Now, something I'm looking forward to, but also fits the mold of what I'm most uncertain about, is how the Sooners on the field are going to match up with other SEC teams. Clearly with Brent Venables, they've got a head coach that when he was at Clemson, not in the SEC, but they were aspiring to beat the Alabamas, to beat the best in the SEC. So he knows what competing against SEC teams and beating SEC teams looks like. But how do the Sooners compare? We know they've taken great strides on defense. Is it enough? I mean, I think they're going to be competitive, but I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I'm also really uncertain about it. I don't have a good sense of just how competitive Oklahoma is going to be.
Well, I had Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, was on my show last autumn. And off air, I asked Greg, I said, what's the chances that you would allow Oklahoma to bring its 2017 football team and play this first year in the SEC? He said, I don't really think that's possible. And it appears there were some logistical problems. Those 17 Sooners were good.
Yeah.
They were the equal of Georgia and Alabama. OU went to double overtime in this national semifinals with Georgia. Georgia went to overtime with Alabama in the national title game. Those three were they were dead even. Sooners were SEC ready in 2017. But every season since, OU football has declined, mostly very gradually. It's almost like,
imperceptible.
Cooking the frog in the pot. He doesn't know it's hot water. You turn it up a little, and he eventually is cooked. The Sooners have gotten cooked here now 6 years later, 7 years later, because of this lack of improvement on the program. Most of that's on Lincoln Riley. I think 2023 was the first time, to Brent Venables' credit, 2023 was the first year since 17 that OU was better than it was the year before. Is that good enough? I don't know. It worries me that OU's apparent weaknesses, are in the lines.
Yeah.
The offensive line's being rebuilt. The defensive line is questionable. That's not a good place to be going into the SEC. So uncertain about how will OU live in the lines where the SEC is known for its interior trench warfare football.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, it feels like, because you look at, and sort of the same way I mentioned earlier, there'll be time, another juncture to talk about other sports at OU going to the SEC, but I sort of had this feeling watching LSU and South Carolina women's basketball play. And obviously two of the best programs in the country, but watching them, the caliber of play, the caliber of athletes, I thought, ooh, I don't know how OU's women's program stacks up. And obviously they beat Texas. They were really good in the Big 12. They've been really building and positive momentum under Jenni Berry, but I sort of feel the same way about SEC football and the lines that the OU lines are going to have to go up against. It's like, ugh, I don't know about this. So yeah, I don't know where Oklahoma ranks as far as are they going to be able to be competitive week in, week out, against maybe teams that aren't the Georgias, that aren't at the top, but you want to sort of have a chance to win against. You don't want to have a first season in the SEC where you go, I don't know. I mean, what would be bad? Two 2 wins in the SEC. I mean, something like that would be disastrous, but I just don't know. I'm very uncertain about how Oklahoma will track in the SEC. And frankly, if I had to go on record as saying what I feel most certain about, it's probably something off the field, because the on-field stuff seems uncertain to me.
You know, I was thinking the same thing, Jacko, because, what do I feel most certain about? I think it's how OU will fit in culturally.
Yeah.
People are so worried about, will we live up to, will my school live up to SEC standards and tailgating or game day atmosphere or roads into the campus? The city fathers are all worked up. Everybody settle down. I've been to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I've been to Knoxville, Tennessee. I've been to Fayetteville. I've been to Columbia, South Carolina. You act like Oklahoma is like we're still getting here by stagecoach. The Sooners are going to be fine. They got a great game day atmosphere. They got a great crowd. They got a great stadium. They got a great all that stuff. I mean, the Sooners are going to be fine in that regard. We need new roads, but not for Saturdays in autumn. We need them for, Tuesday morning in March.
Yeah, taking my kid to school. That's what I need a new road for.
Yeah. Trying to get downtown Oklahoma City. I'm about 2 miles from Tecumseh and Tecumseh Road and Flood Avenue. If I get past that, I'm halfway there. So if we're going to fix some things, let's not worry about game day. Sooners are going to be fine on game day. They got the great atmosphere. They're going to fit in fabulously.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that in bits and pieces in some of those non-conference matchups that now become conference games. We've seen it when Alabama's come to town and OU's gone to Alabama. Tennessee, same sort of thing. I think that the fans have recognized on both sides some commonality. I mean, I think game day feels similar. I think the emotion feels similar. The energy feels similar. So I agree. I think it will be a good fit. Now, the cultural part that I'm a little uncertain about is one of those uncertainties in all of college athletics, and that's NIL money and how OU spends, what they've got to spend. I think it's going to stand up, but obviously that NIL money right now is so critical. And it sounds like if you I know we can't take everything we hear at face value. I know it can't all be true, some of these NIL deals, but the money seems really big in the SEC when it comes to the NIL. So it's one of those things that we don't really know the truth. So how is the perception? What does OU have at its disposal in terms of NIL? I think they're going to be fine there, but that's sort of on the cultural side. That's the one thing I don't know for sure is how OU fits in culturally with NIL spending.
Yeah, and it is a concern because privately, OU has expressed concern about that. Fans are worried about it. All kinds of people are worried about it. But here's what I would say. If OU doesn't have as much NIL money as Auburn, if OU doesn't have as much NIL money as Missouri, if OU doesn't have as much NIL money as Ole Miss,
yeah,
well, then Oklahoma football is not the program we thought it was.
Yeah.
Then the fan support. Let me tell you who's not crying any rivers over OU's dilapidated state in NIL. Texas Tech, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. I mean, the Sooners have been at the very top of resources in the conference in which they've been for 100 years. And if they now go to a conference and they're on the bottom of that, looking up, if they're in the second division, well, then they need to look in the mirror and see what they've been doing wrong, because we're outside. Texas A&M has all kinds of advantages with the state fund and the oil legacy, all that stuff. A&M, I got you. I'll give you A&M. I'm not giving you anybody else. If Tennessee's got more money than Oklahoma, it's because the people of Tennessee wanted to give more money than the people of Oklahoma. That's not on anybody except the people involved.
Yeah, definitely something to watch for. Hey, talking about culture, talking about those stadiums and those matchups gets me excited about some of the places that we're going to get to go and Sooner fans are going to get to go. What's the stadium, Barry, you're most looking forward to visiting in the SEC?
All right, I'm going to turn it around because I often get to pick first on these kinds of things. And I actually thought it too. I'm going to let you go first. I don't want to take yours. If you got one, I want you to pick first.
Well, One I know you've been to because I didn't go on the trip because we used to split OU and OSU trips. I didn't get to go to Alabama. So I would like to go to Bryant-Denny Stadium. Also, Between the Hedges at Georgia. I mean, I've never been there before. So I know those are the two bell cows right now in the SEC, but stadiums that have a lot of history, a lot of tradition, those are the top of my list, Alabama and Georgia.
Well, I've been to both. They're both great. I actually think Neyland Stadium is even better. But the one I'm really looking most forward to is Tiger Stadium at LSU.
Death Valley.
Heard about it my whole life. They got the live tiger, out in a cage. Probably doesn't pass humanitarian standards, but there he is outside the stadium. I have been to Tiger Stadium. I was just there in May for a baseball regional 100 years ago. And I would also put Auburn up there. Jordan Hare. I really admire the Auburn fan base because they've done a little bit. It's the story of Kansas State and the story of Oklahoma State in which they've sort of created their own culture in the face of not a lot to build with in terms of history and tradition and winning. And they built themselves up into great places with good fan bases and consistent atmospheres. And Auburn, of course, has superseded them even more so. I think it's 86,000 now it seats at Jordan Hare. So really looking forward to Jordan Hare Stadium in Auburn. Not looking forward to getting to Auburn, Alabama. It's a pain in the butt. But looking forward to the stadium once I'm there.
Well, and I was thinking about, a place like Starkville, Mississippi State, and the cowbells. Like, I want to experience that. I want to go to the swamp and, the Gator fans doing the chomp. I want to experience that. But like you say, there's some places that are a little bit tricky to get to in the SEC, much like the Big 12, let's be honest. There's some places you can't fly directly to. You got to actually work to get there. Is there one of those places that, SEC schools in, maybe not the stadium necessarily, but a locale? Is there a place in the SEC that you're really looking forward to venturing to?
Yeah, and part of this is I'm an old English major. So I've been to this place one time. I was there for a day. I didn't get to immerse myself the way I'd like to. Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah.
I'm a huge William Faulkner fan, The Sound and the Fury, those kinds of Absalom. I love his novels. And of course, William Faulkner's museum or home or whatever they have is just outside Oxford. He wrote about northern Mississippi in his books. So Oxford, Mississippi's at the top of my list just because of William Faulkner, not because of Archie Manning or Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I have to say the locale within the locale that I'm looking forward to going to is the Grove, which is in Oxford, obviously. Right. Ole Miss's tailgating scene. It's renowned. I really want to go check that out. So count me in for Oxford, but not because of the literature. Sorry. I'll go to the William Faulkner house with you, but I'd really rather go experience the Grove.
I'll bring a couple of my books. You can read them on the plane. Actually, I think we'll probably drive to Memphis. So on the drive to Memphis, you can read The Sound and the Fury.
I'm for it. The place that I've been there before, but I didn't really get to experience like I want to. Columbia, South Carolina is a cool place as well.
It is. Yeah, it is.
It's definitely on the, it's not sort of the college town feel of like Starkville or Oxford or one of those places. It's more cityfied, I guess you would say, but definitely that old Southern charm. Some of the things I remember from my one trip there. I'd really like to go back and just kind of experience the restaurants and the scene. And let's be honest, that's not sort of one of those renowned stadiums, but on game day, South Carolina fans are pretty cuckoo for their Gamecocks. So that stadium, as I remember it, is like a spaceship landed in Columbia, South Carolina. It stands out like nobody's business. So definitely interested to go back there. All right, before we get out of here, let's talk about traditions, Barry. Tradition you want to see in person. What is it in the SEC?
Well, I'd go to something you mentioned, and that's the Grove in Oxford, which is their massive tailgating scene. It's on a pastoral, as I understand it, a huge greenway in the middle of campus that is just legendary for its tradition and its it's tense and just generation after generation doing the same thing, and people dressed like, it's maybe not antebellum, but dressed like it's 1935, and
or it's like Derby Day at Kentucky.
Derby Day at Kentucky's a perfect one. Yeah, they're not dressed for a football game. Let's put it that way. So, a lot of the guys in coat and tie, and a lot of the women in skirts and stuff. So sort of silly when you get right down to it. But I'm all about silly as long as I don't have to participate. I don't mind watching it. So,
do you have some seersucker? Do you have a suit you could wear for your trip to the Grove?
Well, I'll be in a sport coat, and I will probably pull all stops out. And I got a couple that would match anything anybody's got in Ole Miss. So
there we go.
Probably fit in good. I'll probably be the most popular guy there. But that's what I'm most looking forward to, probably the Grove.
Tradition for me, a lot of it comes back to fight songs. I love college fight songs, Barry. And I know that some of them get played a lot. Frankly, taking Boomer Sooner to the SEC, people in the SEC are going to probably think, man, OU plays that fight song a lot. Yeah, they do. And I know at Tennessee they play Rocky Top a lot, but I love hearing Rocky Top and getting a chance to hear that at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. Can't wait for that. A lot of great fight songs in the SEC that I'm looking forward to hearing. You're humming it right now, aren't you?
I am humming Rocky Top. Alabama's got a great one, too. Alabama is the theme of my childhood. College football in the 70s, you always had that Alabama fight song in the background on college football televised games. And, of course, we haven't even mentioned a school that has maybe the more tradition than any of them, but we know them so well because we saw them in the Big 12 so often. And that's Texas A&M, the Aggie Warham, the Fighting Texas Aggie Band, all that stuff. That's actually, I got to tell you, the thing I'm looking forward most is getting to see the band again. We got to see them at the Texas Bowl.
Yeah,
in Houston, so that was cool beans. I love the Aggie Band, but we've seen them before. It's nothing. It's not going to be new.
No, not new, but cool nonetheless. Cool. It was cool seeing every time I see him. I sit there and watch. It's just like getting to see Red Panda. Like I've seen it before, but I'm going to watch it again because I don't quite understand how they make it work every single time. Hey, you mentioned Alabama's fight song. We didn't even talk about no Nick Saban. I mean, he was the personality of the SEC. Personality now is a little bit up for grabs. I suppose Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, maybe sort of the face, Kirby Smart. I don't know. Who are those personalities that we're going to be giving our attention to in the SEC?
There's two that come to mind now. Kirby Smart's going to be. Kirby Smart's got the dominant team, the dominant program. He's not Mr. Charisma. He doesn't really even have a commanding presence, I don't think, like Nick Saban. He's just a heck of a football coach that's, riding Godzilla. He ought to be on Game of Thrones or something like that blonde-headed gal that rides the dragons. That's what Kirby Smart is. But anyway.
With his visor.
Yeah, with his visor and talking whatever he's talking about. But there's two coaches that are just hoots to be around, and they're crazy. They're crazy funny, and they were born. One was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and one was born in Norman, Oklahoma. It's nuts, but Lane Kiffin and Eli Drinkwitz. Now, Eli Drinkwitz, I don't know why he was born in Norman, but he was. He ended up growing up in Fort Smith, but he's born at Norman Regional Hospital. So he's crazy, and he'll say anything. And, of course, Lane Kiffin's the biggest character in college football with his social media antics and his willingness to poke the bear, even if it's Nick Saban. I don't know if he's going to poke Kirby Smart. Ole Miss and Georgia haven't played enough to do a whole lot of poking. But it'll be fun being around those kinds of coaches. Most of the SEC is a bunch of serious, bunch of guys that you really don't want to be around. Steve Sarkisian is that way. I don't know who else. Brian Kelly. Those guys are just very serious-minded people. But Lane Kiffin and Eli Drinkwitz, they have a good time. They
do. I will say the one thing about the coaches in the SEC that comes to my mind, it's the hair dye, Barry. The hair dye in the SEC among coaches is off the charts.
A lot of hair dyeing going on?
Are you pulling my leg? Get out of here.
What is this hair dye? You will teach me of the hair dye? Are you telling me you can change the color of your hair? Why didn't somebody tell me this like 24 years ago when I got white hair at the age of 39?
Do you know the color we could make? I mean, we could do with your hair. It's like it's already been stripped of color. We could add any color you want to your hair, Bear. You could have blue hair. You could have pink hair. We could do anything you want.
Yeah. Could you get Les Miles color, whatever that color that is? What color? I don't know what color that is, but can you do that? Can you get me that color?
I think that was Hunger Game tribute red. Have you ever seen the Hunger Games movies?
I have not seen the Hunger Games. No, but maybe they'll make a musical and I'll go see it.
One of the things about the Hunger Game stories, a part of the people is they have gone all sort of over the top with their hair and their makeup and their clothes. It's kind of like
sounds like going to the mall today. How's that different from walking the streets of Oklahoma City?
There's some commonality, but it's really common when you see some of the crazy hair colors and then you see some of these SEC coaches and you think, it doesn't look natural. Who let them out of the house thinking, hey, that looks great, honey. That looks like that's just your hair color. I mean, it's ridiculous. That to me is the thing that we may have to write about it because of my fascination with the hair color. Let's be honest.
I've actually colored my hair once in my life. I was 24. I was in a church. I was in a church production where I played an older guy. So they dyed my hair. They dyed my hair gray.
Right.
And then if they'd have just waited a few years, cast me out, I could have just played the part right then. En natural, as we say in France.
Well, if we can get you to do something similar, I think we'll have to have a show about that. But on this subject of the SEC, that's all the time we've got for this show. We've got all sorts of our content at selloutcrowd.com. You can find columns, videos, podcasts there, as well as on our mobile app. If you have not downloaded it, do that today. If you want our content sent straight to your inbox, sign up for our newsletters. It's free. It's easy. Just head to selloutcrowd.com and opt in. If this happens to be your first time hearing or watching us, be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.